Standing in our little chicken yard here, which is just under 1/10 of an acre. You can see a lot of little friends waiting for me to turn some compost. And behind me is what is our active compost system in here, where we're turning material, piling it up, letting them kick it apart. And this will be material that leaves this season to feed our gardens. But I'd love to be able to get some green pasture, some active, growing, fresh greens for our hens. How can we do this in a fenced-in area with so many friends down here? We've got a lot of ladies. There's somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 or so hens. A lot of them are old retirement age hens. They're here having a nice time. You can see all around me are food scraps and leafy greens, weeds from the garden, eggshells, and the like. There's not a lot of active green growth in here, and we can still make green pasture happen even with this intensity of chickens. And the key to it lives here in these full, alive, viable seeds. Now in this case, this happens to be soft winter wheat. We actually get this, I bought 900 pounds of this for $90 from a local farmer, so it's extremely inexpensive. And we use sunflower seed, which is whole seed. These are not milled or cooked or processed in any way. They are all viable seed. We just fill a 5-gallon bucket each evening, halfway up, with a mix of these seeds, cover it in rainwater, and dump it out. And you can see it just begins to sprout here or there. There's little whispers of sprouted seed all throughout. They love it. They love a good sprouted, healthy seed. They'll eat it crushed, my friend. They'll eat it crushed, they'll eat it processed, they'll eat it cooked, but sprouted is the best. And you can see some areas in here where it's starting to green up because there's more seed that's soaked and germinating than the hens are able to eat. By adding some every day, it's starting to green up more and more. This was an area we just added seed recently, and so you can see where the greens are starting to happen. A few days ago, we dumped in this area, and it's starting to green up even more. You can see in between all the charcoal and the sticks and the food scraps, the wood chips, the old carrots that didn't work out in the field, is actual green pasture. And all that was taking viable seed, soaking it with rainwater for one night, and dumping it out. Here's where it starts to get pretty magical. This is a few further days back, so about a week or so, just on straight piles of old wood chips and rotten leaves that were here. And you can see with enough deposition of soaked seed, now they went through and they ate most of the sunflower, but now it's starting to actually look a little bit like a microgreen pasture. And the hens will chew this stuff back. They're basically eating wheatgrass all day, every day. They'll scratch them up periodically and actually eat the sprouted roots. But that's fine because we just keep adding more seed. All through here is fresh green sprouts that cost less than 10 cents a pound to get going. This is probably about 10 to 15 cents worth of whole seed to get this much green pasture. And that will grow and grow for the rest of the season until the hens kick it all apart. You can see each place that we dumped it over the course of a few days, it starts to sprout up. Now these are areas where we don't actively turn compost, and so we can let this really, really evolve. In fact, about 2 weeks ago was when I added an immense amount of seed to this area, soaked overnight, and now we have this. I'd venture a guess that what's underneath me right now costs a total of about 20 cents in seed. And this was about 2 weeks ago, and this whole pasture under here is now dense enough that the hens have a hard time being able to kick it apart, and so this is going to lock in and actually grow for a while. These rings that are here, these compost rings, make it hard for the hens to scratch the material apart that's there, the bricks as well. We could do well with some logs and stones if we needed to, but it actually is working just fine. We have carpets of lush green wheatgrass that we don't have to cut and bring to the hens. We don't have to soak trays, pour off the water, keep them under fluorescent lights. We just simply keep adding seed, soaked seed, and it greens up, and the hens have an immensely lovely, lush pasture, even though they're in a fenced-in area. It's a pretty nice scene to be able to have that just passively by soaking seed and putting it on the earth, letting it have direct ground contact. We can take it a step further and do this in containers if needed. You can see behind me are crates that differentiate between 2 steps of our composting system. We've got our compost that's finishing over here, which will pile up and the hens will kick apart. And then this is where raw food scraps get dumped in on a straight pile of sawdust. And so these folding crates are a way to differentiate those spaces. And in order to keep them weighted so the hens don't knock them apart, we put compost in there, and surprise, surprise, I also added a bunch of that same seed, same day. You can see the hens really like this. And now we've got these little portable to-go luscious lawns. Now this has wood chips and red wiggler worms added, and the seed on top, really, really raw compost in there. I mean, like whole rotten onions and all sorts of stuff. And it works. This is one that I haven't opened yet. You can see the wheatgrass trying to squirm out the sides. And there's some really luscious greens getting ready to happen. Once they've had a few days, they turn incredibly green. And then if we want to give them a super bonus, we can take this thing, now that all those seeds have sprouted, and dump it out. And they can get access to all of the worms and pill bugs and the roots that are in here. There's an immense amount of food in this. Soil life, pill bugs, everybody and their uncles down in there living in this beautiful rich soil. And so we can just dump this out wherever we need to. There you go. Sprouts, greens, worms, everybody in between. And then we can simply refill this with some rotting food scraps, some worms, some wood chips, some leaves, it doesn't matter, and throw some whole seed on top. Wheat works really nicely, but maybe we've got old kale seed or bolted lettuce or a bunch of chard that bolted in the garden, or a farmer has a good deal on oats. Doesn't matter. Whole seed mixed in. Give it some time and you're left with this. The red stuff in there I think were red currants we threw in just to give them extra flavor and nourishment. Super easy. By all accounts, having a bunch of hens in a relatively small space should equal disaster, should equal completely knocked apart, killed soil, really disease issues, all sorts of things like that. But adding biota, adding life systems, adding these seeds to the mix that can take the excess nutrient and turn it into themselves, that the hens can then harvest and add nutrient, all of that creates an extremely living earth system. The aroma in here just smells like freshly pressed wheatgrass. It's really quite nice. You'll smell food scraps once in a while, but there's tons and tons of carbon in the form of this sawdust, and that absorbs most of the odor and excess nutrients, and it works really nicely. I've even been surprised that I can throw soaked seed on literally direct, straight sawdust and get that. I would suspect that these greens aren't as nutrient rich as the ones grown in the pure compost, but if what you had was access to sawdust, you could simply put your soaked seed into that and amplify the amount of nutrition immensely. So a dried seed, which is then soaked and sprouted, is probably 5 to 10 times more total food and nourishment and pleasure for those hens for the same amount of price. And since it's not complex how we're doing this, it's extremely easy and really worthwhile. They'll graze this as hard as possible, but the wheatgrass, we're in the active growing season, will replenish itself pretty rapidly. And as this declines, whatever, we've thrown seed into the next one. And as that one wears out, okay, we've put it in the next one. You can see some of these rings keep the hens from being able to scratch at them, but they can self-serve from the side. Just so simple. Get some whole seed. It can be organic or not. The person I bought this from, it is not organic seed, but I just asked him what sort of sprays he used, and he said, it's wheat, I don't really actually need to spray it with anything, so I don't. So it's technically conventional, but there's no intervention with spray, and all the seed is growing in the organic matter of wood chips and leaves and raw food scraps, and even just straight up sawdust. I don't have a filter on this video. This is how green it is. It's kind of ridiculous. My hope is that even just a few people that watch this video that are raising chickens consider the idea of adding whole seeds to their system to soak and sprout, and integrating them at enough volume to allow your hens to enjoy extremely rich and pleasurable nutrients, not to mention the fact that your eggs will be so much more colorful with all of these beautiful greens going through your sweet, sweet ladies. Let's have some conversation in the comments. Do folks do this already? How does it work for you? What are some gotchas or questions? What are some of your favorite seeds to work with? Do you have a system that's even simpler than this that people should know about? Have some wonderful, constructive, thoughtful conversation. I'd look forward to learning some things in the comments too. And happy green growing for you and your feathered friends wherever you may be. Rooster man.